Hello gamers. Okay, I'm not gonna go there, but anyways, welcome to Disturbing Video Games Iceberg. The Iceberg, we shall learn about the most disturbing things the gaming industry has to offer. And yes, they do have a lot to show. A lot. Some of the things these games have to offer I can't even show, since they're simply that bad. School shootings, intense gore, and even underage fiddling. Some people just make video games about things that probably shouldn't have been made at all. And by some people, I mean the Japanese. Like, really, what the fuck, Japan? However, weirdly, it starts off kind of soft, as you'll see, as the first few games are either not that bad or just very well known. Or both. But trust me, we're gonna get there. Along with that, the keen eye and loyal follower would know that, hey, didn't this guy do this one already? I mean, look at this. And yes, I did. However, there are a lot of messed up games out there, so that puny iceberg is only one row of games, which can be seen as disturbing. And this one is a whole nother set. The same, but different. I looked through both lists and no games have been mentioned twice, so if you like this one, you'll love that one. And if you like that one, you'll love this one. Also, before we start the iceberg, I am a kind soul. And greedy. So what I've done is I've looked through the games and their price. And if this little star appears when the game is being shown, it means a game is free to play. Yes, it's entirely free. So tonight you'll both learn about the scariest thing the gaming industry has to offer, and you'll expand your gaming library. So why not sit back, relax, and see what the gaming industry has to offer. It's a lot, I can tell you that. Just, sit back and find your nearest Bible or something. Oh yes, we are starting this low. For most people, the Doom games aren't really that scary, since they are FPS games and not horror games. So, I mean, going through hell and having to fight demons would be the foundation for a horror game, but when you have this pumping in your ears and a pure determination and sight to take revenge on the demon world, then there is no time for getting scared. Rip and tear. But now, we know these games and they aren't scary, so it's disappointing. Alright, getting into the horror scene now. Left 4 Dead, or just Left 4 Dead 2, same game kind of, is a game from Valve where 4 players have to survive the zombie apocalypse and work together to get past through the horde of zombies. Whilst being a game with some scary enemies like the witch, the hunter or others, and a scary scenario in itself, it does get overshadowed by your friends laughing over someone getting pulled in by the smoker. Along with that, the mini mods kind of take the scariness away. Valve is going to make comedy after all. It is a well-known Valve game, yet it shines more on the co-op side than the horror side. Yet that side shall not be neglected. It can honestly be scary sometimes, and those who have played it knows that. PT can probably be seen as the greatest teaser for a game ever made, as PT in itself is a game in itself you can play. It was meant to be a teaser for the game Silent Hills in the Silent Hill series, note the S. However, PT in itself did greater in some areas than the game in itself. The game in itself is rather easy, so you just kind of walk around a corridor for 5,000 times, while the story plays out around you with the radio explaining how a family was murdered by the father, while other weird and creepy events unfold around the house. Like this. The game is great at scaring you, as it kind of blends psychological horror with zombie spooky horror in a perfect way, which I guess you could expect when a game is made by Kojima and Del Toro. Despite the name, this game involves a lot more than just a forest. In the game, you start off in just the right way, by crashing a plane, getting inserted on an island and losing your only child. And you thought Mondays sucked. As you then wake up, the game begins to feel like a survival game, which it is. However, as anyone who's played the game knows, you are not alone on that island. No, there are cannibals. subhuman cannibals in some way, I guess, who will try their best to kill you and tear you apart. As you build and explore, you're gonna see the weird side of this island, but the scary part also remains. That being the fact that wherever you are on the island, these cannibals are just out of reach, preparing to kill you. And all you have to defend yourself with is your surroundings, your bare hands, and God's goodwill. Which you don't have. I mean, look at yourself. Little Nightmares is a game that follows a little girl named Six. Good job, parents. Who tries to escape an iron vessel called Mao in a twisted world with a mild feeling of childhood over it. And why is she suddenly adventuring through a world like this? Well, she's hungry, so why not crawl through a nightmare realm for a sandwich? Along with that, this demon here might also have a thing or two to say. While being a horror game, it does go away from the classic boo I gotcha to the more lenient like damn this shit got real. It lingers on subjects like self-harm, abuse, and even cannibalism, which is supposed to mimic some kind of childhood trauma or other events that might have scared people for life. Don't know why cannibalism is a part of that, but hey, if it's trauma, I guess. Just wouldn't be my first pick. Dead Space is, as you would expect, a science fiction and horror game franchise in space, where there's dead stuff. The game follows a system engineer called Isaac Clarke, who's on a spaceship on a manhunt trying to find another spaceship in space which has gone radio silent. However, as the ship tries to dock in an area, it gets attacked and overrun by necromorphs, which leaves most of the crew having to defend themselves and the ship from the attack. Except for Isaac, who is looking for his girlfriend on the ship, because why should an engineer help with mechanical problems when pussy is on the line? As the crew loses and the ship is overrun, Isaac must now defend himself against the entire alien herd. And all of a sudden, the title makes sense. Along with that, there's a bit of an alien vibe here and there, but who doesn't love that? It's a great film. Until Dawn is an interactive drama horror game where you have to survive the grueling scenario that 8 young adults find themselves in as they go through the Blackwood Mountains, which are filled with danger. In the game, you have to make decisions and find clues, which alter the story of the game. Yes, it's one of those butterfly effect mechanic games. It's highly praised in that, it's pretty good. While these young adults just want to party, then the weirdos of the mountain ain't letting that happen. Masked individuals, flamethrower guys, and other weird things makes this place perhaps the worst place to have a get together. Yet, it happened, and now you have to get them out of there. And yes, again, if some of them die or get injured, it's your fault. Dumbass. Yeah, there's a prize behind this game is kind of dead since it got so popular and now everyone knows what the twist is. But hey, let it just hang in the air for a second and see if people actually get it. But for now, I'll have to cut in and snap back on track. Doki Doki Literature Club, while looking like a average dating sim, which it also is to some extent, does take a weird turn as Monica, the one girl you can woo, begins to take over the program and deletes the other girls' files, and, well, all files really, while she plans to date you for eternity as everything else ceases to exist. Yes, you, not the player or the MC, you. Oh, how the lonely hearts get filled in this game. While that is scary in itself, the real scary events can be gently unlocked as you progress through the game, and see the many girls get twisted, manipulated, and then kill themselves. And then DDLC Plus came out and it became a dating sim once more, so I'll just leave this here for now. You can fight me if you want, but in the end, we both suffer from heartaches. You have no power here, we are both losers. For me, Danganronpa has always been one of those games you knew existed and people really enjoyed, but never got around to play it yourself, let alone watch someone else play it for you. So I expect and know that I got a few things wrong and that people will get mad at me, but that's life, and my channel. Apparently, in this anime-style game, you follow a bunch of high school students around, as their lives is going swimmingly. However, unfortunately actually, they are forced to murder each other by a robotic teddy bear called Monokuma. So guess which country made this game, huh? It has a bunch of elements in it, like adventure games, detective mysteries, visual novels, and even a straight up dating sim. But weirdly, not horror, but I guess it can be seen in some of the other elements. Yeah, anime is some scary shit. Speaking of, it has its own anime show, which means the games must be good. The Evil Within is a classic in the horror game genre. The game's gotten huge props for their well-made horror scenarios and general shticks, although the gameplay and characters could have used a bit more, apparently. In the game, police detective Sebastian Castellanos, I don't speak that language, English, what the fuck, has to investigate another murder case with his associates. However, him and his partners suddenly find themselves in a weird world which they aren't familiar with at all. And in this world, we shall witness things which has rated the game 18 and above. Yeah, that's right, sex. No, wait, that's the wrong one. Oh yeah, scary things. I mean, it's a classic horror game, so there's a bunch of stuff. I mean, the very first thing that happens is him being chased by a chainsaw man, so expect that, just a lot more as well. SCP Containment Breach, as you would know, is a game that takes you into the world of the SCP Foundation, the famous internet mystery men, which can range from original and creative to moving in Lego. In the game, however, you are a Class D personnel who has been sent down to the facility so tests can happen on the SCPs. But, oh no, scummy corporations are scummy things. The SCPs have been let loose, and now you have to escape and run for your life. It can spark great horror as you're being chased by whatever the fuck this is. There is also a multiplayer option, which I know for a fact since I've seen Boku and one played with a span of hooligans. And then it became more fun than scary. Ah, Lovecraftian horror. Hopefully there's no cats in this game. Call of Cthulhu, the official video game, yeah, official, is a game that explores the world of the famous story of Cthulhu in a semi-open world game. Despite taking all inspiration from Lovecraft's story, it isn't a direct ripoff and does go its own way in some areas. This can mostly be seen in the stealth mechanics that have been implemented into the game, to give it the feeling of an actual video game instead of just a story that has been ripped off a story. Because without that, you could just have read the story, just read the book then. There is also a sanity meter, which you gotta look out for, and if you don't, you become insane. The horror in this game is, of course, a Lovecraftian kind, which dives into the psychological horror department and scariness of the most vile, disturbing yet all-giving creatures the world have to offer. And in this game is, of course, Cthulhu. Although, the cult of Cthulhu might be the bigger enemy here. Spec Ops: The Line is indeed the 10th installment of a longer-running franchise with the same name. In this game, you play as Captain Martin Walker, who has to do a recon mission in a post-catastrophic Dubai. However, despite being a third-person shooter, this does indeed also delve into the fun topics of PTSD and the horrors of war. As Martin Walker walks to war, then you get to see what war is really like. Yep, there's a bunch of stress and depression, giving you a sad and terrified feeling as you just gun down people with families. But hey, you're badass and you shoot guns. That part is fun, right? It's more when the shooting ends it becomes not so fun as you realize what you've done, but you've still had fun, right? It's not fun, it's not. Dark Deception is an almost free game on Steam and others, which revolves around collecting points in a maze-like challenge with monkeys. I say almost free because the first chapter is indeed free, while the others you have to pay for. The sneaky corporations, they know how to get you. The game is, of course, a maze where you have to collect points, as said. But there's, of course, a scary bit. Yes, you get chased down by this monkey fella who always follows you and is never too far away. It doesn't matter how many sweep maneuvers you make in this maze, he's always right on your tail. And you don't want to get too close to this guy. He isn't really a friendly monkey per se. The game is a bit like Pac-Man, except first person and scary and dark with monkeys and with no Pac-Man, so not like Pac-Man at all, but it's almost there. Lucius is a game where you gotta be an asshole, which means it's a game for you, dick. In the game, you play as a kid called Lucius who has demonic superpowers, which he uses for evil, and not evil like make them think they closed the fridge but they actually didn't. Now I'm talking about murder here. Horrible accidents and murders is this little kid's specialty. Since he was born on the 6th of June 1966 and he was named Lucius, then it was clear that Lucifer had some interest in the kid, since that's all his style. However, the underworld waits to corrupt him to the age of 6, because, again, the devil has an aesthetic, you gotta keep it up, it's a real thing here. While the game does give you an interesting experience since you are now the bad guy, then it does also have some weird moments, like 2 doctors just having gay sex in front of a kid. Is this some kind of message, or why is that here? It's a bit out of place, You only got one chance. Do not miss your chance to blow. Well, in this case, missing your chance will lead to the world dying. In one chance, you play as a scientist where you live a happy life with a good family. And along with that, you and your colleagues have just discovered the cure for cancer. So how could it ever be bad? Well, as it seems, this cure kills a bit more than just cancer cells. It kills all cells, which the scientist doesn't have enough time to reverse. And the cure is spread out in the air and is now killing everything on Earth. And I mean everything. And now you have 6 days to save the world, while your world around you literally dies. Nature, your friends, and even your family. What will you do? And what can you do? This game is really sad. In fact, it's more sad than scary, I'd say. But it's so sad it's scary in some way. Metro, or Metro 2033, because there's a bunch of things in the world called Metro. Please, fellow of God, use more creative titles. I mean, if I search in Metro, what do you think comes up? That's right, every single Metro before this game. Nah. In the game, you play as a Russian called Artem, who has just survived the nuclear apocalypse and annihilation of most of humanity. Lucky guy. Although now, he must survive in the metros of Moscow, where he hid from the bombs in the first place. Down here, he must survive all the crazy things that Metro has to throw at him, and not only are they scary, they're also Russians. So that makes them even more hard to deal with. Although, they're Russians from Moscow, so perhaps not. It's just monsters, let's stick with that, for now. It is based on a novel with the same premise, so if you don't like to experience the dread of running for your life in a video game form, then there's also a book form. Among the Sleep is a game that should remind you a lot of Little Nightmares in some way or form. In the game, you take control of a toddler who has just been put to sleep by his mother. How sweet. However, as he wakes up again, he has to find his way through the room and other areas, making the game an exploration game where you use your sentient teddy bear as a way of solving puzzles, among others. But guess what? Yeah, you get chased by monsters. Getting a bit familiar at this point, but that is most horror games, so it's fair. It can either be a feminine woman who hums a Norwegian lullaby, or a guy in a trench coat. What they're supposed to symbolize is a thing that you can think of when you sleep. Home Sweet Home. Why name your horror game after one of those slogans your aunt has pictured on the wall of a house? Now someone has to make a horror game called Live, Laugh, Love about some aunt who's doing none of those things. Which, let's be real, they aren't in the first place. Anyways, hatred of overused slogans that have lost their meaning aside, this game is an adventure game which combines a man who's waking up in a deserted place he knows nothing of with Thai myths. And the Thai apparently believe in some fucked up shit, as the game is filled with hands going through the windows, moving objects, and this fine lady. What this game can teach us is that we should be more afraid of the Thai than waking up in a strange place we know nothing of, because if this is their mythology, then imagine their everyday life. Jesus. Ah, that's a classic. Limbo is a game that kind of went its own way, being almost a blank noir game, where it's all white and black. It combines the lack of ambient sounds, lighting effects, and other effects to make a kind of scary ambient in the game, despite not really being a horror game per se. There are some things that will shock you, surprise you, and will certainly make your heart race, but when it comes to the disturbing thing about the game, then that would be the setting in itself. Again, horror is not really the genre it follows to heart. Soma is a game that takes place underwater in an undersea research facility. In the game, you play as Simon Jarrett, who has been tricked into the facility as he thought he was going to get some treatment for his brain injury, yet ends up in this underground facility because it's owned by two companies who seem extremely dodgy. I mean, anyone who builds a space cannon, a literal space cannon in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, is a dodgy person. And there are two of them. As Simon wakes up again, he now has to explore this rundown facility to try and escape. However, he quickly finds out that this place is filled with near-humanoid creatures, among others, which is the real meaning behind this facility. And now begs the question, can Simon survive this underground facility? Well, I haven't played the game, and neither have you, so we don't know. Night in the Woods is a game with a weird combination of genres. Psychological horror, mystery, cute, colorful, and great soundtrack. Yeah, okay, Obama, great work there. The game, as you can see, has two sides. On one hand, it's a gloomy story about someone dropping out of college, only to come home to a changed hometown and an apparent cult in the nearby woods, knowing other weird things that lurks in the woods. And on the other hand, it's a story about friendship between zoomorphic animals that makes jokes and are gay. A weird combo, but it works, I guess. The game does indeed fit in the scary games department, but it's just weird seeing it besides that. I mean, it doesn't really fit, but it does somehow. This game is all about... Did I get you? Well, kinda weird, I know, but that's kinda the game in a nutshell. As you explore this rent killer of a house, a cute little ghost called Spooky greets you to the house, or just mansion, as you're welcome to explore the many halls and rooms of said mansion. And how many? Oh, well, about some 1,000, you know. In these rooms, small cardboard cutouts of cupcakes and rainbows turn around and try and scare you. And well, that can't be scary. And that's correct, but when you're running from a demon of death at max speed through dark corridors and are lost in a huge mansion, then this little tip coming out will surely scare you. That sounded weird. I should have just said cutout or sort of tip. But now we're here. Yes, the game also features actual scary monsters, which will scare you surely, and these little cardboard cutouts is a bonus scare, which also does scare you, as have been seen by many Let's Players. It's a fun game that kinda pokes fun at what people might find scary and how we will react to them, because getting scared by a kawaii cupcake is not a thing you want to tell the boys. Hellblade is a game that follows a mix of Norse and Celtic mythology that takes you on an action-adventure through a dark fantasy type of game. In the game, you travel from Scotland to Hell, and not Hell, where Hell rules. Mythology is so much fun. Down in Hell, the main antagonist must try and win back her dead lover from the ruler of Hell. Whatever. However, that is a rather tough task to handle, as even the Norse god of beauty, Balder, couldn't be saved from Hell. But of course, why bargain with someone, or why you should do a certain thing, when you can just stab them? It's a great strategy. Maybe we should use that next time I have a debate with someone. The game follows the antagonist through the journey to Hell, where we see both Celtic and Norse mythology, and of course, spookiness. And even the many sad and tragic parts of her life. You know, like her husband dying, but that's just the plot. It's not that big, you know. Atmosphere, horror, mythology, it's all good. Ah yes, Hatred, the most controversial pick on this entire list. And trust me, that says a lot. Hatred is an FPS which revolves around a mass killer who is fed up with the world and the humans that feed on its carcass. So, he embarks on a genocide crusade to show the world and its inhabitants how fucked it really is. And who does he kill to show the world how fucked it is? Innocent people, bystanders, and complete strangers. It's a game where you just kind of do a shooting, you know, do a hate crime. Do you see why this game got removed from the Steam greenlight? Gabe Newell himself even had to apologize personally about the game. The game is supposed to be a counterweight to the many progressive choices that fill the gaming world, so putting in this game of pure hatred could show the hypocrisy of the industry. Nonetheless, the gameplay in itself is not really amazing to say, getting some mild to okay reviews. In the game you arm yourself and go out and just commit genocide. If you fail, you respawn and try again to kill more people. The game is just extremely dark and not really that scary. The scariness is most likely the fact that you are a masked shooter who's just committing a hate crime on innocent people, but besides that, it's not really like, there's no jump scares or anything, it's just you being an asshole. Omori is a rather new RPG which takes inspiration from games like Yuminiki and Earthbound, and can be seen as a kind of mix of both in some circumstances, or a different point of view. In the game, you play as a Hikikomori, which is a Japanese word for people who have cut themselves off from the real world and live in their own home or room as a kind of protest against society. This also means you get to explore two worlds in the game, the real one and the fake one, aka Dreamland, which is also where the Yuminiki part begins to cut in. The game has a clear-cut battle system where emotions play a key role, which is a kind of rock, paper, scissors vibe to it, where the Earthbound begins to kick in. However, the scary kicks in through the psychological horror elements, which one could expect from a guy who has cut himself off from society as a whole. Anxiety, depression, trauma, all has a role which makes the game cut deep in some ways. While this game might sound like your average horror movie family setup with a small, shy girl called Aya, a dead mother, and a weird father, then things about it get even more, how do you say it, weirder. You see, since Aya's father is a weirdo, he also dives down into weird hobbies. That being the many test subjects in the secret laboratory in the house, which somehow breaks out in the beginning of the game and hides in Aya's room. A bit much? Well, that's the entire game for you. And now, she's bound to explore the many secrets of her mad father, her laboratory, and the many monsters inside of it. And now, outside as well. And it's in this laboratory that you find the many cruel experiments of her father, along with all those who led a terrible fate at his hand. Fran Bow is a graphic adventure game with point-and-click elements, which revolves around a 10-year-old girl called Fran Bow, who is so troubled that calling it trouble is an understatement, I'd say. She has some real trauma problems, as she saw her parents die in front of her and was left alone in a dark forest with only her cat by her side as a friend. She is then found and put in an asylum which feeds her pills, which gives her hallucinations. So yeah, she isn't in the greatest spots of spots. As this is a literal insane asylum with lunatics and visions of human experiments, she doesn't really like the place. And therefore, she somehow escapes and goes on a journey through the same forest she was left behind in. And here, she meets the many characters that give the game its creepy factor, but also its charm. Japanese horror. You know what that means. This game is a part of a longer series of games which follows a small friend group of, you guessed it, students from the school who see some messed up things in the village of Hinamizawa, where the so-called incidents happen every now and again, and of course, it happens near a local festival. It's like peak animated stuff here. Gas attacks, people tearing up their own throats with their own hands, people disappearing, you know, a normal day in Japan apparently. This leads to the friend group to try and solve these mysterious incidents, where they go to many lengths to try and solve these problems. Even time travel. But just as you go deep into these cases, you also see the horrors of it. Apparent suicides, murders, vile crime scenes. This game drags you through the horrors of accidents and incidents, and shows it with a side of visual novel. American McGee's Alice is the developers American McGee's attempt at remaking the story of Alice in Wonderland, but more brutal. Yet published by EA, a weird mix. And yes, that is indeed his real name, American Hamburger McGee. That part is false, but otherwise it's true. Instead of being a quirky and imaginary story that reminds you of various amounts of drugs, this is a third-person action adventure where you go through the same story, but in a cruel and gloomy version, where you'll fight your way through Wonderland. Alice don't take shit from nobody. Weapons, enemies, murder, blood, swearing, alcohol, might as well put a sticker on that says people behaving rudely. While not being the scariest game on here, it is up there in the badassness. My uncle says that Obama will be added to the next Smash game. No, he won't. It doesn't make any sense. Oh, well, he was in Nintendo, so you just wait and see. Nah, but for real, this game is clearly based on the good old, my insert person here works at Nintendo, therefore I can make ridiculous assumptions. An entire game based on a joke. The game in itself is rather simple. It's a game where you and your friend talk about said uncle until realizing that the uncle is indeed not a co-worker at Nintendo of America, but an evil cannibal who is out to eat someone, which leads to several endings where someone, including you, your friend, or both, or none, is eaten alive by the uncle. In the game, you have to figure out the secrets before things get out of hand, and, you know, steal your friend's Game Boy because he has Pokemon Red on it and you only have Tetris. And it's good, Tetris is good, but it's not Pokemon, so. Pretty straightforward. Never-Ending Nightmares is a game where you go through a row of never-ending nightmares, which comes up row after row. If you die, become depressed, or commit self-harm, the current nightmare you're in will end, but the next begins. This is also the game's checkpoint, as they keep track of you after you commit depression, self-harm, which is kinda cool. I mean, the whole never-ending nightmare is a bad thing, but it's a cool concept. In the game, you play as Thomas Smith, who is supposed to be a personification of the many things the developer, Matt Gilgenbach, has gone through himself. Depression and OCDs have given Gilgenbach a tough life, and I want to show this feeling of uneasiness to the world, with Thomas Smith and the game's nightmares. It's a rare moment where we get to explore someone's uneasy feelings and background, this time in video game form. The Crooked Man is an old RPG Maker game which fits the classic RPG Maker game list. Horror game, edgy yet nice cover, anime, it has it all. In the game, you play as David Hoover, who has just moved into his new apartment. Good for you, Hoover. However, as he moves around his new apartment, he finds a note. And another. And one more, and all of a sudden, he is now on a lookout for where the string of letters might end. It ends up going outside the house and the town he lives in. All while he looks around, someone is following him. A man with a crooked back in what seems to be an almost impossible way. The Crooked Man. Will Hoover get to the bottom of this, or will something terrible happen to him? Something crooked. My god, what is this? The new cover of the next Klaus Schulze album? Legendary joke. Warning, legendary jokes. Only legends will get this joke. You have been warned. You've been warned. Oh well, he was a legend and now he's gone. Dark Seed is a point-and-click adventure game that is split in two worlds. A normal world and a dark world, like usual. But this time, it's inhabited by aliens. The main guy of the story, Mike Dawson, is a rich guy who has just bought a mansion. And instead of trying to explore his own house, as he just moved into, he simply just takes a nap. However, in that apparent dream, aliens shoot a chip into his head, which wakes him up with a huge headache. This makes him finally explore the mansion, where he not only finds clues about the previous owner's death, but also the Dark World, and the ancient overlords, as they're apparently called. In this Dark World, he not only finds further clues, but also a plan to kill the entire human race, with the use of his head and the so-called Dark Seed, which has been planted inside his head. Purgatory is another RPG Maker game which fits the three important steps to adopt a true RPG classic game. In the game, you play as Henri M. Louvre, a shy, lonely schoolgirl who was dared by her friend Emma S. White to come along with two other friends to a purgatory building that is said to be inhabited by the Butcher, a giant beast of a man who kills anyone who wanders inside. Because, you know, fun. That sounds fun, right? And yes, she winds up falling into the basement, severed from her friends, and into a building filled with blood and corpses. And now, she must escape because the name Butcher is never a good sign. The game's end is determined by the many endings that might occur, depending on what choice you make in the game, and most of them is not really, that good, but horrible. Horrible. So next time your friends make you do something you don't want to do, then just say no. Death Forest is the name of a Japanese horror game which takes place in the Japanese suicide forests. So the name is kind of fitting, I guess. In the game, good old Kazuki Uchida drives through the forest on his motorbike, which breaks down in the middle of the forest. And, instead of actually trying to fix it or call someone who can, or just, walk the rest of the way, he decides that walking into the forest of suicide, which in this game has killer monsters, to find machine parts and tools to fix the bike. That's, for some reason, the best way to get out. It's the Japanese suicide forest, not a cars and repair shops. Why is there a motor and batteries in the first place? This game kinda works like a Slenderman game. Collect the pieces to get out, and don't get caught by the monsters. And in this game there are multiple. We have Average Scandinavian, the smile only a mother can love, he grooving, and gamer posture. Off is another RPG maker horror game on this list. Except this one breaks tradition. It isn't anime, there is no HD game cover, and it's French. The game is about a batter who looks to be an average baseball hitting guy, yet this man is on a sacred mission to purify the world, and by that he is actually trying to annihilate it, like totally wipe out all life in these zones, which he calls them. While the game has offsetting enemies and a general uneasy vibe, the scary part is not really the interesting part of this game. That would be the turn-based battle system, where instead of actually attacking one at a time, it's based on a cooldown system. A niche idea and the very thing that takes this game apart from the other games and makes it special. But the story is still there, and you now have to go through the world and make sure no life continues. As a baseball guy, it's a weird costume, but it works. Dead of the Brain is an old point-and-click adventure game from 1992, which is quite old. If you're from 1992 or beyond, you're old. The game focuses around a doctor who has made a get-back-to-life serum, which you already know what leads to. It brings them back, not alive, but as aggressive zombies. This is also what the game is about, a doctor and some wise ass who has to outrun the pandemic of reborn aggressive people. Oh, and you're the building painter and not the doctor. What, do you think you get the satisfaction of being the smart guy? No, you're just some guy they put in there so it didn't feel so empty in the game. While the story mimics most other stories about the dead coming back to life with doctors and scientists, it does have some different perks and sticks in the game, which makes it kinda differ out, but the story is still the same as most others. Irisu Syndrome is, on first hand, a kind of cutesy anime game about solving puzzles, while an anime bunny girl watches on and gives you comfort. It even has a backstory, some other characters, and some pictures of lore as rewards. It seems that the focus of this game is the bunny girl, whom is a cryptic fella to understand. While nothing is directly said, pictures and interaction does give some hints. Pictures like these and this and these interactions. Yeah, of course there's a creepy undertone. It's either that or horny. If it's neither, then the game is boring. That's it. That's the standards we have here. Either my pants get scared off or I take them off myself. The game can be boiled down to this. A puzzle game with two modes to play and a girl to figure out. This girl. Ah, My Little Pony, and creepypastas. I can already imagine the fandom. I don't want to, but I can. This game starts off with a classic 2D platformer with a pony jumping around. But, of course, it ends with some creepy additions being added, like creepy laughter, edited ponies, and blood. It plays out like any other creepypasta, but now it's pony themed. What Remains of Edith Finch is a game that takes gaming to another level, as some see this game as a good example of how video games can be seen as art. In the game, you play as Edith Finch, who returns to the house of the Finch family in Washington State, after being away for some time. He enters the many rooms of the residents in the house, which leads to a short flashback and a small section of the game, where you learn about each resident, their story, and even their demise. While critics praise it for its artistic part, it does also include some rather creepy events, which spark some unnerving feelings. I mean, you are exploring the dead residents of this house. Shit gotta be unnerving. However, despite some minor errors here and there, this game is seen as an art piece, which can be played in first person. Viscera Cleanup Detail is a game where you play as a janitor on a space station, deep in space. A rather meek job at most. However, in this game, the job becomes a bit more interesting as the space station has been the scene of an alien invasion and a minor battle for said station. A bit of déjà vu, but As a janitor, you have to clean up the area, the blood, shells, body parts, and all the others. While you do this, you also begin to explore the scariest parts of war. Well, as scary as it can be after the battle is over. Oh, and aliens as well, a lot of those. But who knows, perhaps alien fights are fun, but we don't know. But in the game, they're brutal. Like, damn, that actually happens. Someone went through this. But I guess most people know this game through the Christmas edition, where you play the same kind of game, but instead of being a space station, it's Santa's home, where Santa have gone wild. Oh no. The description of this game is scary enough to make its own entry. It is a suspense, psychological horror, lolicon, eroge visual novel. Why would you make any of that? Is this what happens to a population when they live on an island for so long? Isolated? Alone? Well, as if the description wasn't messed up enough, the game in itself gets its horror value from the messed up situation of the game. Like, the very first thing that happens in the game is that the main character gets in a car crash that kills his parents and weakens all his senses, so the world becomes a meek horror film of a world, where everything is a blurry mess with grunts and no joy in the world, especially since the music and food can't even be enjoyed. However, as good becomes bad in his life, then bad also becomes good, as a hideous monster who enters the hospital he's in is actually gorgeous in his eyes. Which leads to drama and more, which would spoil the game, but remember this part. Lolicon eroge novel. Well, actually don't, but it begins here. Again, the horror comes from the chaotic, bizarre events of the game, which is clearly shown off. And since this is only the beginning, imagine the end. Tamashi is the name of a Japanese umbrella company, apparently. But it's also the name of a 2019 game which takes inspiration and in some way tries to culminate the many obscure Japanese horror games from the 80s and 90s. And we'll see how they go. And trust me, we're gonna see more. There isn't really much to be said about the game in itself other than the fact that it's a platformer with puzzles, and the horror comes to the setting and the level design. It includes such things as devil worship, gory things, and nudity. And other things that'll make your average religious follower gasp, as it has some kind of critique on religion in there, it feels. But again, the main goal of the game is to try and capture the feel of an old Japanese horror game. So, if you want to play an old Japanese horror game, then play this one. It's all of them in one. At least they try, it's not really, but hey, they try. Teoshide is a game which could remind you of Tamashi, except instead of being based on the many Japanese horror games, this game goes its own way, not taking any inspiration from anyone, but instead goes down the abyss of taboos, religious themes, and the Portuguese. I don't know either. While being a puzzle game, it's also an esoteric experience, which explores the many twisted and weird landscapes which are to explore. Erotic nightmares, symbolic faith, and many other things which get represented in a twisted way can be seen here. It tries to scare you with this edgy realism where it takes you down the path of the unspeakable, yet true beings and feelings. And as you can see, the aesthetic is also kind of surreal in a way. The Static Speaks My Name is a game that takes about 5 to 10 minutes to play at most. It combines humor and silliness with a disturbing and sad story about a man who is about to commit suicide. However, first, he must think about a weird painting he saw. Why is it like that? What was the idea behind it? Well, he can go ask the artist himself, as he have captured him in a cage in his basement. Do you see the vibe it's trying to make here, right? It's a game where you learn about the main character and afterwards commit suicide, as life doesn't go too well for old Ernest. Along with that, he has pet shrimps, a picture of his friends, and a deep depression. Ah yes, my favorite Jimmy Neutron episode. Okay, it's not an actual Jimmy Neutron horror game. That show is written up in itself. Let it just be over there. In reality, it's an RPG maker game with a text and feel over it. There's no cowboys or guns, but there is a weird statue. Not really Texan per se, but it's still there, you know. The game takes place in the dream world of an 8-year-old boy, when an alien entity appears and threatens his family and the stability of the entire dream world. Jimmy sets off on an adventure to save his family and eradicate the threat of the pulsating mass, hint the title. Along with that, Jimmy will have to work with his own family, confront his own shortcomings, and brave the creepy nightmares of his own subconsciousness. As it takes place in the dream world and there is a lot of weird happenings, then yes, it has that Yuminiki feel over it. A real surreal horror experience. The God of Crawling Eyes is a white and black game about a kid named Max, who's on drugs, to try and see if he can cure his colorblindness. Which might also explain why the game is in black and white, and why weird things happen. As he tries to go on as usual despite being on drugs, trying to live a normal life, he stumbles over and tries to solve the mysteries at his school. Either that or again the drugs is speaking loudly, and that's a huge part of the game actually. Apparently the school is, what can I say, it's haunted? Well, it isn't actually haunted, it's more like it is haunted-ish. Well, basically there's a dead kid in the school who died there and might still be there, both physically and ghost-ishly, you know. It is said that the kid was connected to a cult who prayed to the god of the crawling eyes in this very school. And now you have to solve a puzzle about a cult on drugs. And colorblind. Along with that, his teacher is called Blackmore, and she ends up making the game more black. Good. Afraid of Monsters is a game about being afraid of monsters. Alright, cut, finish. Okay, not really, but the name kind of explains it all, you know. I mean, that is all horror games in some sense or form, but they chose that as a name for some reason. Well, in this Half-Life mod, you go to explore the world of a drug addict who is overdosing on painkillers and then wakes up in a closed hospital, where monsters now roam around the halls. Half-Life monsters, you know, high crap and all those. It's a game about switching from the drug world to the real world, where he must survive in the drug world, and when he inevitably wakes up to the real world, he realizes what he has done, as those weren't zombies. They don't exist at all. Those were real people. A switch from horror ambient directly to psychological horror. More Lovecraftian horror. Conarium is a game that takes inspiration from Lovecraft's book At the Mountains of Madness. In the game, 4 scientists try and explore the limits of nature, where they, of course, see how far nature can actually go. And how do they do that? Well, exploring the world. You know, these kind of worlds. The game has a very Lovecraftian way of scaring you. Yet the game's storyline mostly fills the feeling of the game. However, you're still gonna play at the edge of your seat, as you never know what's gonna happen next. Also, it was published by Iceberg Interactives. How fitting is that? Clear is a 2D adventure horror game that takes place in a giant mansion where so-called chaos servants have been experimented on to try and see if they can be used as regular servants. However, now they're let loose and you have to roam the residence without getting killed. So they didn't become normal servants, they are very much active killer robot servant things. The game has its own kind of mechanic where sound can trigger and affect the real-time enemies, which sounds like something that would lead to the most annoying gameplay out there, but somehow it worked out well. Controlling sound and all that, how would you even do that? The scary part of this game is clearly the feeling of being chased, which is the entire game, so get used to it. Welcome back to Lovecraft, Iceberg Interactives, and Dread. In pursuit of Loth Noddler, you are a detective who is in pursuit of Loth Noddler, who is a top suspect of the murder of a man in the town of Wellsmith, which you must solve. As you go on a long investigation to try and find Noddler, it begins to take a toll on your health, and instead of trying to take a break, you must go on, because justice never stops. However, at some point, your sanity does, and you begin to see some strange shit. In the game, reality and the imaginary world begin to collide, as you still have a job to do. So good luck trying to not go insane in a Lovecraftian world. Yep, what a good man might call a bad combo. My Only is a first-person pixel horror game starring an unnamed man whose lover tragically drowned. Ever since then, he has visited the graveyard every night. However, one rainy night, he decides he will visit one last time to purge himself of the bad past. But he finds out he's not alone, for the spirit of a woman haunts the graveyard. Ooh, which woman could that be? The only one we've ever heard of in the entire game. AKA, it's a Slender Man-ish game where you collect note pages in a graveyard to try and escape the evil spirit. It's a true kickback to the old YouTube days where those types of games were the thing to do. I wonder what it is now. What is the modern Slender Man? Oh, alright. The past was better. The House in Fata Morgana is an anime visual novel. Can there be non-anime visual novels? Where you explore the past of the residents of the Thurl Mansion. You go back ages and ages to explore how the past owners of the house behaved and shaped the mansion's history, in a dark way. Yeah, sometimes the past is a little fucked up, so some things happen in here. And that is what you're gonna research. You travel back in 4 periods where you not only get a true feel of the era, you also see something which is both new and also entirely messed up. An example could be 1869, where a greedy businessman keeps his lover trapped, which then escapes, which he is sad about and gets in a shootout between someone else. Listen, it's a very cut down version. I mean, the game is rather long and this section is rather short, so, But it is a gist of it, I guess, so, that's how it is. According to my source, that is. Sanitarium is a game about remembering who you are. After a car crash, a guy known simply as Max wakes up not knowing where he is, how he ended up there, or who he is. His name he got from an inmate, and that is all they can give him. However, the answer must lay somewhere in the sanitarium he now inhabits. As he walks through the building, his mind and vision begins to play tricks with him, as he goes from reality to a weird dream world, where he must save himself from whatever twisted danger that might lay in these imaginary worlds. A town of twisted kids, or an Aztec village which has seen the return of the wrath of Quetzalcoatl. I think that name has always been annoying. Now, let's see if Max, if that even is his real name, can overcome the dangers of his own head. And we're back. RPG Maker, anime, horror. The art cover isn't that scary, but hey, it's there. While this town might just be another town like any other, this day is quite different. It's the day of the alien invasion, which wreaks havoc on the world, and indeed this village. And boy are they hideous. It is your job to defend the village from these disturbing monsters in any way possible. either that be exploration or combat. Through some 7 games. Yeah, 7. You would have thought the aliens would have given up at this point, or the village would have gotten used to the aliens attacking them constantly. But, you know, it's good to be determined like this, I guess. Keep reaching for the stars. I mean, you're gonna lose again, but keep the spirit up, you know? It can't be that bad. The scary factor of this game is the aliens, who are absolutely not aliens. Those are the nightmare creatures, which are placed in a scary scenario to give you a most creepy effect. They might be scary, but man, 7 games. Sorry to say this, aliens, but you are useless. Mittens is not only a good name for your cat, it's also a name for whatever trip fest this is. I should never have taken that shit. Now I'm inside a painting with a gun. In Mittens, you play as a man who has left his own home dimension since assimilation has ruined his beloved culture, which is now dead. Therefore, he tries something new in another dimension. However, as he goes from place to place, these dimensions begin to cross over as the game's art style begins to change, all from classical paintings to the pink Atari vibe. The dimensions give a cool vibe and an interesting idea. And the scary part? How hideously weird it is. I mean, look at this. My god. I believe they call it anime. But hey, it might have a good thumbnail, who knows? But still weird with all this anime and most stuff on a creepy video game's Iceberg. I mean, it wouldn't have been my first thought, but here we are. The game in itself is a combination of different stories which take inspiration from stories like Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass. It's a visual novel, of course, anime, in which you have to try and explore a weird event that happened in the area. And as it seems, I don't think people play this game for the plots, let alone the scary stuff, like, come on. Also, while looking on TV tropes for info on the game, a random line just kind of popped up. It says, brother-sister incest, Yabawuki first, depending on a choice made earlier in the chapter, Tomosane and Hasaki kind of sex on the bar's rooftop before he confronts Takuchi. The fuck happened here? Brother-sister incest, what? On the rooftops? And again, that's just one surplus from the article on TV tropes. Imagine the entire game being this. Oh dude, I love ice cream. And yes, that is indeed the game. It's a game about you trying to escape the grasp of this kidnapper killer cook who has trapped you in a basement, as you just fell for the oldest trick in the book. Free ice cream trick. Huh. So predictable, yet so effective. It's a free game you can find on the sites which reminds you of Y8, and it should be rather quick, so if you're bored, then try and explore and experience the thrill of being kidnapped, kids. The game looks like one of those Y8 games, and it features 2 playable characters. Again, 2 kids. But there's also the main enemy, the kidnapper, which is for some reason a chef. Don't know why, apparently kids taste très bon. You know a game is hard to find when you have to use the Markiplier Wikipedia to find results about the game. So, here is a Markiplier fan's description of the game. Dream of the Blood Moon is a game in which you play as an unknown woman who dreams of the Blood Moon. Your objective is to seek out and find blue tears which will free a tormented girl. But the girl herself is out to kill you, for some reason. It actually says that on the Wikipedia, for some reason. I don't need to write a script here, I'm free to go. During the dream, you will relive the tormented girl's moments before she was tortured and sacrificed, by completing puzzles and keeping a distance to an angry ghost. Top tier shit, nice description. As you can see, in the gameplay it's mostly foggy, because dreams are foggy for some reason. I mean, they aren't, but in video game form they are. And I'm guessing this is the one you're trying to save. Ghoul's Forest is a bit of an old classic. This game is a Doom remake which has a good bit of lore for being a mod, and it does have some damn good gameplay as well, with you spawning around a forest trying to kill some monsters, or just surviving depending on your situation. In the game, you play as a master bowman who seems to have no challenge in life. While being in the forest, you have to kill the monsters in the forest, so you can brag to your friends and family about the fact that you did, and to show yourself that perhaps no one can actually best you. Jesus, gotta know this guy. However, that might be easier said than done, as these monsters ain't easy to kill. They swing right at you, and sometimes the only way to actually get them to go away again is by actually shooting at them, while they're rapidly approaching you. Which, again, might not be the easiest thing to do. But again, look at this guy, Master Boomer. No, you can do it, fucking asshole. Weird dreams can be horror movies in themselves. Actually, make that nightmares. That's just what it is. The game itself is an old one, which will be played on the Atari system. The plot is kind of simple. Steve has a crush on his co-workers, who unknown to him, is actually controlled by a daemon. Yes, a daemon, not a demon, different things, you know, mythology and all that. Which slowly gets control of both Steve and now also his crush. As Steve begins to fall asleep, his dreams becomes weird. And it is here you get to play the game. Basically you have to survive the dream to win. Well, let's just call them nightmares. With this walking around, it can only be a nightmare. And yes, the nightmares is made by the daemon, you have to defeat it to get the girl and all that. You knew that already. Remothered is one of those games that reminds you more of a film than perhaps a classic video game. It focuses a lot on narration, cinematics, and doesn't have that much gameplay compared to other video games. The gameplay is more or less just, you know, walking. In the game, psychology has a huge part, as there's apparently not a big line between good and evil. But has there ever been that? While you have to make decisions in the game, and perhaps even morally, you also have to, you know, run for your life, as a man with bad intentions are running after you. So perhaps there is a fine line between good and evil. I mean, if a man is trying to kill you, he's clearly evil. But what if you're the evil one? Then perhaps he's the good guy. Oh man, philosophy. Again, in the game, you do have to make decisions, and you have to try and make a plot work here. But again, the game kind of plays itself. I mean, the cinematics kind of roll out, and you just make a few decisions here and there, and all this dandy. Oh yeah, anime and its own website. How much porn do you think is in this? Well, a lot. Hardcore, 18+, just look at the content. I think other kinds of baits go around in these parts, if you know what I'm saying, which I definitely do because it's masturbation jokes, haha. The game in itself has a plot, that being that a city, which used to be a prosperous, functioning city, has now become a region of lawlessness, degeneracy, and anarchy, as the entire zone becomes quarantined. And by that is meant that the government just kind of doesn't care about the place and just ignores it. They did that because so-called the witches has begun to ruin the area. But who cares about that? Somehow you are supposed to masturbate to the decay and destruction of civilization. Thanks Japan, but next time just stick to Pokemon, that's good enough. I mean, making porn of those games would be either bestiality or pedophilia, so no one would ever do that, right? Right? Oh damn, Canadian horror games. Nah, just kidding, it's Russian. The title of the game does say something about the game in itself, and isn't just a weird eye-catcher. The game is quite literally about buying a bag of milk from the store. In the game, this girl, who has seen quite a lot of trauma and psychosis in her life, has to go down to the store to get a bag of milk. However, you aren't playing as the girl. No, you're playing as the voices in her head. On the trip down to the store, being about 20 minutes, just like the game, you not only learn about her traumas, but also have the chance to influence her moves. The game always ends the same way, but you get some more dialogue. So prepare yourself to bully this little girl. Little Russian girl. The game 177 is a Japanese game that takes inspiration from Japanese law and legislation. Specifically regarding the Penal Code of 1908, Article 177 regarding rape, the definition of rape, law-wise, and the punishment of it. And in the game, you aren't playing as the victim, you are playing as the rapist. In the game, you have to rape a woman by running after her, clearly in spite of what she actually wants. when you get up to her, you, well, rape her, and depending on how he feels, the end changes. If the man does not give pleasure to the woman, he goes to jail. But if he gives pleasure to her, and she enjoys it, they will marry. Not how love functions, kid, but it is Japan. Fun fact, this game was even mentioned and talked about in the Japanese parliament, where the game was considered explicit by the Japanese government and was recalled and re-released with more conservative scenes and gameplay. Not the first time gameplay has been talked about in politics, but by far one of the weirder ones. Ah, look at that guy go. There is no way there's an entire game based around him. Okay, while being epic, this is indeed not the game we're talking about. We should, but we aren't. Roly Polies is a weird game to say the least. It's a game about badly made 3D characters just kind of staring at you. Clicking on a letter on the main menu will give you a word which starts with the letter. Then a short animation or a minigame, and then a proverb. The main menu also has a proverb, where the entire game can, again, be played. It's another one of those games that are weird to be weird, and for some reason, that gives a scary vibe. Coronation Day, also known by the title The, great job guys, is a horror-themed ROM hack for Super Mario World. And how does the title fit the game? Well, Princess Peach can be seen as the main enemy in this game, and perhaps The can be an It reference, but even that is kind of stretching the boundaries a bit. The game is pretty straightforward, with you trying to escape Peach as Mario, where after you end up in a forest, which you must find your way through. In my opinion, the Super Mario World vibe kinda takes over the scare vibe, but it does kinda give a creative, original vibe in itself. Kowloon Skate is a game that takes place in Kowloon City in Hong Kong. You know, the block-like city that can apparently be called livable. In this game, the demolished Kowloon walled city re-emerges from the realm of Yin, the underground, back to the streets of Hong Kong in the living realm of Yang, or the overworld. The Hong Kong Supreme Feng Shui Conference determined that the reappearance of the walled city was a sign of an imbalance of the yin and yang, and if these two parallel worlds are not separated once again, great calamity could occur. To set things straight, the order of Feng Shui would need to be reinstalled in the realm of Yin. Thus, the protagonist, a super Feng Shui practitioner, was sent into the Kowloon walled city to seek and awaken the four symbols so order could be revived in the city. It seems to be a game where you explore the so-called city while the devs try to use its vibe and with dystopian feel to create a walled-in and creepy-vibed city, which it did alright. That is what the critiques say at least. Uta Unanatari is a Japanese horror game which has not been translated in any way, so good luck trying to understand what's going on. It is said to be a good game, but it never really picked up steam outside of Japan because no one actually knew what was going on in the game. It features a bunch of blood, death, and scary faces. The plot is something along the lines of you walking through a bigger house where a murder has indeed taken place, yet finding an exact plot is hard since, well, I'm not learning Japanese to understand the game. I will go far to research this, but I won't learn an entire language just to understand this. Well, perhaps not knowing what's going on while people die all around you might add to the creepiness. You know, sometimes not knowing anything is a bit more creepy than actually knowing it. I mean, most of the time, the opposite might actually be true, but for this game, let's just say it works like that. No, not showing that one, no, get that out of there, right? Right, the name says it all, you know what the hell it is. Jesus, why do people play this shit? So, instead of watching that, you get to watch me play TF2 MVM. Anyways, My Lolita is a game about dressing up your Lolita. And what is a Lolita? Well, have you heard of a lolly? Well, that's it. An underage girl which you have to watch undress. It's a pedo game where you're supposed to be a doctor since it's a medical simulation game. But again, playing doctor with the kids? Just come on. Is it a horror game per se? No. It will still feel creepy while playing this game. And if you don't, the FBI has a word with you. El Sueño de la Razón, aka The Sleepy of Reason, por favor, is a game about a little girl named Anne, who is plagued by inner demons, which are called Grey People. Anne must therefore confront them so she doesn't end up being mentally ill, as these demons is a toll on her. However, instead of a normal confrontation like perhaps professional help or facing the problem you have, Anne must face these demons, literally, in her dreams. That is what the game is about, going inside Anne's head and kicking out the demons. It's also a classic RPG Maker game. It fits all boxes. The horrors of man. And more gameplay I can't show. So, enjoy my NG gameplay. Banquet of Sadism as a game is pretty straightforward, although calling it a game feels a bit off. It's a game where you have a slave which you torture, humiliate and do other unearthly things to for 30 days until she dies. Is there a goal? An objective? A reason? No, not really. It's simply a game about you letting out your inner demons that you might have, and just do horrible things which you kinda just shouldn't do. There is nothing good about this game, or people who actually enjoy playing it. It's like a thorn in your side, there is simply nothing behind it, it's just punishment for no reason. It is a taboo of taboos. Why did I just instinctively know that this is going to be another one of those games I can't show simply for the title? It just says Little Riding Red Hoods. Why should that be a bad part? How did I know this? Well, the game is pretty much just a messed up version of the original tale, which is told in the main menu and then completely put aside as it becomes a bad 2D platform with unnecessary gore, just floating pornography, and a Mario feel over it. Is this gaming? I wonder why people actually make these games. What's it supposed to give? I mean, it's just bad on badness. Holy one-offs, Mario is fucking dead! Impaled even! And that is where the name comes from. The game in itself is actually a hate letter to the gaming industry, and is a message about how stupid gamer culture is, and that it's generally just a bad thing. The game in itself is also a bad thing, it's just a bad game, but it's meant to be like that. You cannot just go around killing everything. Devs, parents, Mario, everyone dies in some shape or another. And you can't really move, the enemy doesn't move either, it's just you pointing a gun and shooting. There isn't really any type of fun in the game, it's simply just going on. But again, the gameplay or even the disturbing nature is not the important part here. Again, this isn't a game per se, it's a message about the gaming industry and our behavior. So perhaps we should actually look into the message, see its point, and perhaps think about them in our lives so we can right our wrongs and go through life in a more learned manner. Unless you're Nintendo, in which case you take it down because they use Mario without permission. You never change, do you, Nintendo? Never change. So, a game I have talked about before on my channel, but not on the last Iceberg, so it slides. I don't care what you say, it's my fucking channel. The Dark Eye is a stop-motion point-and-click adventure game with the feel of an Edgar Allan Poe novel. While the looks of the game are charming and the execution is well made, the storyline is what becomes a bit more dark. It's a tale about a group of people, that being Elise, Edwin, Henry and Hugh, living life. Basically, Henry and Elise is in love, yet they don't know that the other one likes them too, so a bit of a weird love thing. Edwin heavily disapproves of the relationship, and Hugh are just kind of sitting there, being caught in crossfire. This ends in a Romeo and Juliet type of way, in which Elise gets sick and dies, Henry gets pushed off a cliff by the butler of Edwin, Elise reawakens as she wasn't actually dead, not that she haven't died at all, deciding to kill herself as she realizes that her love is now dead and that all is hell, and finally, it makes it look like you, the I'm just kinda sitting here guy, is to blame for the entire affair. You then become insane, and hey, the game ends. During the tale of the story, you're also plagued by nightmares, which only adds to the insanity-fueled fire. Oh, by that name it's either a game about doing some horrible stuff to a bunch of innocent kids, or it's a vampire slice-of-life kid show. Yeah, let's just say that we're too far down the rabbit hole for the latter one. Blood School is a game that is heavily influenced by the game Corpse Party, a game about a bunch of school kids who get teleported to a dark version of the same school they go to, which they either have to escape from or die inside. Blood School is more or less the same, except here it's just an abandoned school they explore, not just teleporting to a dark version of the same school. But the attacking ghost and dead kids is very much a thing the two games share. Even the plot of the two games follow the same kind of trail. No, Billy, that's not super. It's extremely tragic, don't call it that, go to your room. Yeah, Super Columbine Massacre RPG is an RPG maker game about the shooting in Columbine High, where you play as Harris and Klebold on the day of the shooting. While you do play the actual shooting, you also play an added part where the two shooters go on an adventure in Burgundian in the afterlife. While it could have been a simple messed up game where you either feel or experience how it was to shoot up the school, it was more of a message about the stigma that video games have, along with the developer's feeling about the massacre and how it changed his life since he was bullied in the school. Well, until the massacre, where he kind of lifted off. In itself, the game has gotten some lesser reviews, and the scary part is of course the fact that you now relive the time of the massacre, as the massacres. And speaking of massacres, it is said that some school shootings have been inspired by this game, as it can be seen as a training ground for school shootings. Shooters like Alvaro Castillo, Kim McGill, and Radion Aguilera might have been inspired by the game. But it's still a might. They might have gotten inspiration from this game, or they might not. As you can hear, this game might or might not have sparked some fires in the debate about video games and school shootings and their connection. You might think what you want to think, but a lot of school shooters did have video games on their PCs. But again, so does a bunch of people, especially those who have been bullied at that time. Take the debate as you want, but when a game is called Super Columbine Massacre RPG, it isn't really helping the other side, I can say that. Well, building up a dispenser. Honestly, I can't really find much about the game, but the picture said enough words about what the game is about. I, and you, don't need a plot here, or really anything about how the game works. The game features what I can only expect as being an elementary school dating sim, with more than just soft core hints. Like, the picture I've seen makes me wonder why the game hasn't been taken down yet. It isn't scary per se, but it does make you want to crawl out of your own skin and put it in the washer for about 2 hours. Plant Girl Frontier is a Japanese game which you can only really read about in Japanese. So thank God for Translate, right? As you can see, it features underage anime girls. And you know what that means? Correct, it's time to win some MVM, boys. This otaku welfare game, whatever that's supposed to mean, most likely some kind of mistranslate, is centered around defeating plant monsters, whereafter you can proceed to the next scene, which should be the same kind of nature. However, you also have the off chance of wooing one of these anime girls. Underage anime girls, that is. Damn it, Japan, why won't you be like this? I know for a fact that the Abe didn't die for this shit. Rest in peace, you good man. Rest in peace. Dromer of the Drill-Face Goddess is a game that was made for a Retromania event where people had to make a retro type of game. It also led to the creation of this game in the span of only 10 days. This game is rather simple, as you more or less just read text while different screens pop up. I guess it can be called a visual novel, since it does play out in that type of style, yet it's a rather unorthodox visual novel. For once, no anime. Oh, it's anime. Piss. It starts out in front of a cave, which is so menacing it gives you pain simply to look inside of it. Here, you can either enter or leave it be. If you walk inside of it, the game begins and the story progresses. But if you leave, you win the game. Inside the cave, however, you experience the story of the faceless characters and bad events, which all has a Lovecraftian feel over it. It's a game with dread and fear, as the very world around you crumbles and makes you feel scared like never before. And in only 10 days, it does have its flaws, but it's still rather good. After having looked through several images on Google of people being beaten with bats, I found the actual game, which is a psychological horror with some RPG make magic over it. Or at least that's the feel of it. The game in itself is about two kids which both walk about Halloween night without their parents, which they wish they could. However, luckily for them, they get invited to a house party by an old lady, where there are a bunch of piñatas. And that's what happens when you don't have a functional family. You don't learn about stranger danger. And now, the two kids are in this house with piñatas of unusual substance. Along with that, they travel through the house, meet new people and tries to escape, which doesn't go too well. And with the name of the game, you can probably guess what those piñatas actually are. LSD Dream Emulator is a game by Osamu Sato, and Osamu Sato is not like the other game creators. Why use a PlayStation to make yet another game with yet another boring premise? Sato thinks. Fuck it, he says, I'm gonna make art. And art he made. LSD Dream Emulator is a game where you explore the world of dreams, as the levels are loosely based on the dreams that he has had, which he kept in his dream diary. As you touch an object, you get warped from the world you are currently in to a whole new one. As days go by and you experience more dreams, the game also keeps track of them and makes them more surreal and psychedelic. Is it scary? Well, not directly, but it does have some weirdness over it for sure, which could be scary. And now we enter the pit of the most scary games out there, and the least known. Like, Jesus, researching some of these games will make your head hurt. This game has not only been written about in Japanese, but it seems to have also been only played on a Japanese type of PC known as the Sharp X68000. From what I can gather, it's a mystery game which revolves around the incident of a man who had been decapitated. And I presume this fine lady has to find out who ding dang done it. And that leads to a trail down horror lane, as this stuff begins to appear. Despite being a game which people don't really care about, this seems to be the sequel to another game called Horror of Critwell, which follows the same lady and is for the same forgotten computer. Taiwan 2001, or TW 2001, is a jab at Hong Kong 97, which almost copies the game and makes it Taiwanese instead of Hong Kongish. The plot is quite literally the same, as in both plots, the Chinese population is hoarding at the border, trying to live in this area. Because of that, crime rates begin to skyrocket and someone has to do something. And as a result, the native government sends X-person to kill every single Chinese person in the entire world to save the day. There isn't much to be said, since if you know Hong Kong 97, you also know Taiwan 2001. Like, it's literally a copy-paste of that exact game. Imagination is the only escape was a planned kids game for the Nintendo DS, which was never released since Nintendo didn't want to release it. Yet the developer, Luc Bernard, still voiced an interest in releasing the game even up to the Wii U. And what was the game about? Oh, you know, the Holocaust. For kids. It was a platformer set in the occupied France, as the Germans began to round up the French Jews. In the game, you not only saw how the occupation became worse for the Jews, but it also ended up with you having to escape French police and the Wehrmacht as the Vendrive roundup began and all the Paris Jews were rounded up. You even see your mother get captured and never see her again. You know, for kids. While some praise it for being a good way to teach people about the Holocaust, some saw it as a bit of a too dark game for kids. You know, combining the DS and the Second World War is a bit of a bold move by some, and especially by Nintendo standards. But oh no, Luc Bernard does not give up. Well, on Nintendo it does give up, but now, it's Xbox and PlayStation you can find this new game, set to come out next year. And now, as a 3D platformer, as the first game released about the Holocaust. An interesting life choice, but it works, I guess. Berserk is an arcade game which came out in 1980, aka 42 years ago, old man. The game in itself is a simple arcade game where you go around the room, avoid bullets and give some back, not too hard to understand. However, this game has quite the legacy, as most people don't really remember it for the game itself. No, this game is the title of the first video game that has ever killed anyone. Allegedly. Some say it's up to 3 people, but most say it's only 1. In 1982, a man walked into the local arcade for a few games, where he played Berserker. As he played a bit and got a high score, with a total score of 16,660, he put in another quarter, but did not play for too long after that as he dropped dead with a heart attack, and the only explanation was the game he was playing. Another tale goes more or less the same way, when an 18-year-old goes into play at the exact same arcade in the exact same game, and suffers the exact same fate, dying of a heart attack. The last tale is a bit different though. In 1988, the arcade was going on as usual, as a guy was walking through it. As he passed by the Berserker arcade, he sees a quarter kind of laying on the game. As he puts it in, as no one seems to be missing it, a guy comes over and claims it was his quarter. After the 2 teens argue over this simple quarter, they take it outside, where one pulls a knife on the other and stabs him. This is 3 different instances where people have died from the game, and no one can explain how this simple game got so deadly. Some point the finger at a character known as Evil Otto, which spawns when a player is taking too long in one area. Not only has this figure gotten a legacy of being cursed and scary, the town of Calmwood City, while this happened, have 2 water towers which looks exactly like Evil Otto. However, it is fair to say that some lies and hoaxes have undoubtedly been swept over this game. When it comes to the 3 deaths, then the first one has no evidence backing it up, the second one, while being real, since it was documented by a newspaper, that same newspaper also revealed that the player had heart problems. And the last one is simply a man that has been stabbed, which has no real connections to the game, as we don't know exactly if Berserker was the game where this fight happens. And even if it was Berserker, then the game had nothing to do with the fight. And finally, when it comes to Evil Otto and the water towers, then that is simply a coincidence. I mean, it's simply water towers with smiles. And Evil Otto is simply a smiling pixelated face. Despite being a good ghost story, it is simply nothing more than that. Talking about a game that kills people, how about a game that was made by someone who kills people? Robert Steinhauser was a German teenager in Erfurt, Thuringia, Germany, who was expelled from the Gutenberg Gymnasium because of alleged forgery. However, while he perhaps did do this at home, he also did do other things like collecting firearms, researching the Columbine High School shooting, and even modding Doom. Yes, the man who later went on to kill a total of 16 people and wounding 1 in his anger-filled shooting also did Doom modding. This also led to a bigger outcry against video games, as people thought that the games inspired him to do it. But as it seems, a lot of these so-called facts about his gaming habits seem to have been more exaggerated or just straight up false. Also, the man literally researched Columbine and had entire documents about the events in his room. Perhaps that has more to say than anything else. In itself, the Doom mod is nothing important. The fact that an actual murder made it seems to be a bigger influence than anything else.